Hello everyone, I'm Patrick, and today I'm going to be presenting my critique on a phonics video I found online titled English Pronunciation Weak Forms. The target audience for this video are adult English language learners who are trying to learn how to speak English fluently. The video is appropriate to introduce the topic weak forms for the first time. However, I feel that it has both its strengths and its weaknesses. In terms of strengths, the video is organized in the sense that it first introduces the topic along with its meaning, as so.
Specifically, we're going to talk about weak forms. Now, what are weak forms? Well, weak forms are words in a sentence that we pronounce.
Then it goes into providing common examples of weak forms in English.
And to, for, or auxiliary verb.
Now the presenter then differentiates between regular pronunciation and weak form pronunciation.
And some of the common weak forms. For example, the word to. By itself, we pronounce it to. In a sentence, it often becomes ta.
And finally, the video uses two sentence examples for the audience to practice with. That is found here.
In the first sentence, have you been to Oxford yet? Have you been and to are all.
He then concludes the video by explaining why weak forms are important for speaking and for listening.
Forms important. They're important for your listening. If native speakers say the word for in a sentence, they're not going to say for, they're going to say.
So the strength comes from the organization of this video, how it was structured. It's important for English language learners to go from beginning to end, just like the way this video structures itself. In terms of weaknesses, I feel that there are a number of things that Ollie could have done to better present the information to his audience. For one, the definition of weak forms, which I feel is so important to know, should be typed up next to him as he is presenting it. He does that here.
Specifically, we're going to talk about weak forms. Now, what are weak forms? Well, weak forms are words in a sentence that we pronounce very quickly, not very clearly. The spoken pronunciation.
Now, an English language learner will have a hard time keeping up with the speed of his voice or his speech, so having text will accommodate or address that issue. Second, instead of saying that weak forms are usually little words,
Weak forms are often little words, like.
he should have instead used what they truly are, which are function words. He could have given a quick definition, like what is cited in English Phonetics and Phonology, a practical course by Peter Roach. Function words are words that do not have a dictionary meaning in the way we normally expect nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs to have. And then he could have said, some examples include a, and, to, for, have, and are.
And, to, for, auxiliary verbs, for example, have and are.
Now, that part, noting that the last two examples are auxiliary verbs and not citing what the part of speech for the first four examples were, almost creates a disconnect. It's problematic because it's not parallel. Now, the third weakness I want to point out occurs when the presenter starts differentiating between regular pronunciation and weak form pronunciation.
We pronounce it to. In a sentence, it often becomes ta.
Now, to make this more clear, Ollie should have instead noted that in English we use two ways to pronounce words. The first, strong, and the second, weak. Then he could have emphasized it in his example. Like in the beginning he said, to, strong, ta, weak. Now he had strong form typed out above the example, but he did not at all explain what strong forms are, which can be problematic. Okay, in this same part, to is not an appropriate example to use because although it becomes ta in a sentence,
in a sentence, it often becomes ta.
That rule is not applicable when it occurs at the end of a sentence. For example, on page 93 in my book, Roach mentions that whenever to is in the final position, it always keeps its strong form, like in the sentence, I don't want to. This same exact rule exception also applies to the example, have. Now, on page 94 in my text, Roach notes that have always keeps its strong form in the final position of a sentence.
The vowel properly, have, but in a sentence, it often becomes of.
Now, the fourth weakness will have to come from the two example sentences Ali asked the audience to write down. He does that over here.
To say a sentence, see if you can write it down. Have you been to Oxford yet?
If I was a beginner in learning English, this task would be far too difficult, so instead, what Ali could have done was type up the sentences and ask the viewers to read them to themselves after he reads them first, and then try to identify the words pronounced in weak form. After, the video can resume with highlighting which words are pronounced in weak form, and this would be more clear. In the weak forms chapter from my text, Roach provides numerous amounts of sentence examples with the weak forms words highlighted in blue for the readers to familiarize themselves with. Finally, since the presenter is finishing off his lesson with the importance of learning the topic, he does that here.
So why are weak forms important? They're important for your listening. If native speakers say the word...
He mentions 2 points, and I think that both of those 2 points should be typed for the viewer to read along with listening to him. Now, English language learners need multiple stimuli when they're learning. You cannot just talk to them one time and expect them to internalize what you said. Now, this video can be relevant to students on Guam who are attending or who want to attend either UOG or GCC, but of course first need to study to pass the TOEFL examination, which measures their level of English proficiency. Also, learning about weak forms can help language learners become more fluent in English. Like what the video mentioned, it is important for both listening and speaking. Roach highlights in his text that native English speakers find an all-strong form pronunciation unnatural and foreign sounding, something learners would want to avoid. Another more important note pointed out by Roach was that speakers who fail to understand weak forms or the use of weak forms are likely to have difficulty understanding speakers who do use weak forms, which are all native speakers. As you can see, I found this video on YouTube and it was presented by a teacher from Oxford Online English. And in regards to my recommendations for the weaknesses, I retrieved those from the text I am using in my phonetics class titled English Phonetics and Phonology, a Practical Course, 4th edition by Peter Roach, published by Cambridge University Press in 2009. Thank you so much for listening and for your time.